High Definition News for Wednesday morning, November 26th, 2014. I'm Jeff Kaufman.
In
L.A., as in cities across the country last night, outrage in the streets for a second night over the failure to bring charges against the police officer who killed an unarmed black man in Ferguson, Missouri. As that officer, Darren Wilson, breaks his silence to say he believes he did nothing wrong.
I don't think it's a haunting. It's always going to be something that happened.
You have a very clean conscience.
The reason I have a clean conscience is because I know I did my job right.
Darren Wilson with ABC's George Stephanopoulos defending his conduct in the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri last August, a shooting that resulted 2 days ago in no indictment, no charges from a grand jury. And that resulted in outrage across the nation. For a second night last night in Southern California, there were street protests. At 3 p.m. yesterday, marchers gathered at Martin Luther King and Crenshaw Boulevards. They eventually walked 15 miles, 300 people blocking the 110, 101 freeways, finally gathering at LAPD headquarters in downtown.
Men and women of color being killed, abused, oppressed, and imprisoned.
This is where it calls, and I stand with my people and for my people, and I'm walking in solidarity with Ferguson.
Hopefully, we can break through and make a change in the system.
33 people were arrested at Flower and 9th Streets. 100 people were arrested at Broadway and Temple, and the CHP arrested 4 people for blocking traffic on the 101. There were actually more arrests in Southern California last night than there were in Ferguson, Missouri. The LAPD's Lieutenant Andy Neiman.
Most of the groups were very cooperative. They were loud, they're boisterous, and we protected that right. But when you encroach upon the rights of others in terms of safety, that's where we draw the line.
Those protests are continuing in downtown L.A. this morning and are expected to continue throughout the day and perhaps throughout the Thanksgiving weekend.
Whole streets! Our streets! Whole streets! Our streets!
In Ferguson, Missouri, much more peaceful last night than it was the night before. There were arrests and there was a slight amount of vandalism, but nothing like the previous nights in Ferguson, Missouri. From the High Definition News Data Desk, if you are getting out of Dodge today, you may have better luck at the airport than on the freeway, at least for a few hours. On this getaway morning, all Southern California airports are reporting on-time operations, though that may change later today because of a big storm bearing down on the East Coast. Newark and Philadelphia's airports are already running between 90 minutes and 3 hours behind schedule because of bad weather, and all airports will begin to feel the ripple effects of that before the day is out. Airlines have already canceled more than 350 flights today. And a power outage in North Hollywood has shut down the Red Line. MTA says passengers are being put aboard buses, but that is going to slow you down if you depend on the Red Line to get where you're going. Tomorrow's a federal holiday, so no mail, no school, no government offices, no banks. Your trash pickup will slide one day, except in Long Beach, where they'll stay on schedule. If the parking meter says except on holidays, that means it's free tomorrow, but not Friday. Buses and trains in L.A. and Orange counties will operate on a Sunday schedule tomorrow, except in Norwalk and Torrance, where they won't run at all. Metrolink also takes tomorrow off. There once was a man from Nantucket. Nigh came the hour he'd kick the bucket. He pleaded for delay of the permanent snooze. Cried he, please, just one more high-definition news. The angel in black said, where you're going, you'll be able. There's radio down there. It's called hell, 'cause there's no cable. You can listen later, anytime, at highdefinitionnews.com. That's H-I Definition News, all one word. Here's some catch-up for your Wednesday breakfast. This is some of what might have got past you since yesterday. By law, all guns sold in California must have a trigger lock, but the law does not require that the gun owner use the trigger lock. L.A. City Councilman Paul Krikorian calls that crazy, so he convinced the rest of the council yesterday to begin drafting an ordinance that would make it mandatory in L.A. for all guns to be either locked up or trigger locked when not being used. The vote was unanimous. Now a high-definition news analysis. Back in the day, before Twitter, but after Gutenberg, back in the day, if you did not like the news, you changed what made the news, the government or one of its policies or custom or tradition. In our era of fragmented media, if you do not like the news, you change who tells you the news. Change the channel and you change the good guys and bad guys, the winners and losers, the heroes and victims, the right and wrong. News with a point of view used to be labeled opinion. Now a lot of it is just labeled news. Some people think that's healthy. They say everybody has some sort of bias. Reporters and editors, producers, they should just declare theirs up front and let the reader or listener or viewer decide what to do with that information. Most of the people I've come across in this business think that's a crazy idea. Actually, not just crazy, but dangerous. Why would you want to learn about today from someone who felt no obligation to be fair? Somebody who figures you know he or she is biased, so, hey, might as well actually be biased. Wouldn't you worry that the information you did not get might be important? Or that the information you did get might be incomplete? Wouldn't it just be exhausting to keep track of everybody's biases? Probably a bunch of websites would do it for you, but what about their biases? You know, most people are conservative on some issues, liberal on some, moderate on most. And now this high-definition news bulletin. Journalists are actually people. I know, probably should have mentioned that a little higher up. Hang with me. But first, let me declare one personal bias. I don't like to be called a journalist. I am one, sure. It's the word I don't like. Journalist sounds pompous. Walter Cronkite used to say that anyone in the news business ought to be proud to be called a reporter, because if you were doing it right, whatever your actual job title, that's what you were, a reporter. And if it was good enough for Walter, it's good enough for this reporter. So, back to the media, of which there is no such thing, any more than there's the blacks, or the Latinos, or the Protestants, or the gays, or as a lot of people have discovered lately, the Republicans. Again, all kinds of people have all kinds of views about all kinds of things, not always the same views as other people lumped into some random category or occupation. There may be a few reporters who go to work in the morning thinking about how they can slant the news and undermine the Republic, though I have never met one in 35 years in the news business, not one. Most just go to work in the morning and try to do the job the best they can. Just like you, surgeon who saves the life of that guy who was beaten up in prison where he was because he murdered all those women. Just like you, bank teller with a girlfriend born in Mexico who cashes the final paycheck of that woman who rages against illegal Hispanics taking all the jobs, even though her job was taken by the legal Americans who run her employer. They took her job and sent it to Thailand, actually, and then gave themselves a nice bonus for reducing the headcount. Just like you. But unlike you, reporters now encounter people every day in their stories and in their audience who take it on faith that all reporters are different from everybody else in society. That is, they are, intentionally, every day, dishonest. Goes with the territory, they say. The charge is they slant or spike or sensationalize the news to sell papers or goose ratings or get page views. They say everyone knows it, and that's why no one trusts the media. They ignore the gaping hole in that logic. If everybody knows the media is corrupt and nobody trusts the media because of it, how could it possibly boost circulation? And so why again would reporters slant the news? 3 examples this past weekend of the atmosphere news people work in today. Remember that AP video interview with Bill Cosby that we brought you last week? The one in which Cosby tried to get the young reporter to delete the part of the raw tape in which he asked him about the rape allegations, and then Cosby said he would not comment. Here's a memory jog.
And I would appreciate it if it was scuttled.
I hear you. I will tell that to my editors, and I think that they will understand.
Well, I think if you want to consider yourself to be serious, that it will not appear anywhere.
The young AP reporter's name is Brett Zonker. By the way, he's not as young as he sounds, but he's also not a beloved entertainment multimillionaire legend like Bill Cosby. And it's pretty clear that Cosby was trying to use his stature to bully Zonker into deleting a part of the interview that was, after all, on the record, and that Cosby simply decided he did not like after the fact. Zonker was on CNN last weekend.
It surprised me quite a bit that he questioned my integrity for even asking the question. You know, I was there. I have been an admirer of Bill Cosby growing up, watching him on television. I didn't want to ask these questions, but I had to ask these questions because I'm a journalist and I was doing my job.
No surprise, really. Remember that 7 women have come forward just in the past week with detailed allegations, long past the statute of limitations, with nothing to gain except embarrassment and abuse from anonymous web commenters. Yet millions of Americans share the opinion of this man, who attended Cosby's sold-out comedy show Friday night in Melbourne, Florida, where Cosby got a standing ovation.
There hasn't been any arrests. There hasn't been any tangible evidence up against Mr. Cosby.
Or this. Sarah Lacey is the founder and editor of Pando Daily, which does stories not about Chinese food, but about the tech industry. She wrote an article in which she reported that Uber, that Uber, the next-generation taxi company that is a darling of Silicon Valley, she reported that Uber's corporate culture is pretty much defined by its misogyny. Not sure that's really news in the tech industry, which as a whole is pretty much defined by its misogyny. But Lacey had details and examples, and her story did not sit well with one of Uber's top dogs, Emil Michaels. At a company dinner the other week, Michaels pitched the idea that Uber budget $1 million for a team of people to go after reporters who wrote stories Uber did not like. They'd dig up and spread dirt on the reporters and their families. Michaels missed just two small details. One, he's a douchebag for coming up with an idea like that. And two, Uber had invited a couple of reporters to that company dinner, and nobody asked to keep the dinner off the record. By the next day, Uber was no longer famous for being misogynistic. It was famous for being a misogynistic bully. Michaels and his boss, the Uber CEO, apologized, said it was not a serious proposal, just dinner table chat. They'd never do anything like that. Then Uber's spokesmodel, Ashton Kutcher, tweeted, "Why not dig up dirt on shady journalists?" Sarah Lacey on CNN last weekend.
Let's go back to, again, what Emil Michaels said at the conversation, because people like Ashton Kutcher are very good at trying to reframe the narrative around this. He talked about Oppo research. That's not doing a Google search on someone's name. If you have $1 million budget and a 6 to 8 person team to do Oppo research, and specifically, as he said at the dinner, targeting one's families and loved ones and doing it in a way where it would never be traced back to Uber that they had done this, I don't think anyone thinks that's remotely ethical. I don't know a story of that having been done before, and I trace it back to what Travis Kalanick said on stage at the Code Conference last spring, where he said this is a political campaign, hiring political strategists, we are going to throw mud, and he said essentially they were going to destroy opposition. I naively thought he meant taxi companies and not me and my kids.
She hired security to keep watch over her 2 young kids and wonders, when did journalists start becoming fair game? Before you answer, listen to Jeff Greenfield. He's been doing politics and media since 1968 as an author and as an analyst on PBS, CBS, CNN, and ABC's Nightline. On CNN last weekend, he said what's changed the most about news since he started is not news people, but news consumers.
Whether it's about Ferguson or it's about Bill Cosby or it's about Benghazi, which is people increasingly find it almost impossible to believe that a reporter, an analyst, a journalist, will come to a story with the question, what happened? What happened? Because what people bring to a story is, we know what happened because it fits the larger universe that I see. It fits the story that a cop was defending himself against a threat to his life, or a cop was murdering an unarmed black man. Or that Benghazi is part of a malicious attempt to lie to the American people, or that it couldn't be that this beloved figure in American entertainment could be a serial rapist. And I find it depressing that the longer I'm at this, the harder it is for people to just accept the fact, no, I'm trying to find out what happened. No, you're not. You're part of the cover-up.
Reporters are always asking somebody, what is it that you do? And why do you do it? And why should we care? But most news people are really terrible at explaining why we do what we do and what difference it makes. We talk about freedom of the press. We use phrases like the rights of journalists. Sometimes we throw in the word democracy as though it were some sort of pin code. Somebody starts talking about how the press is necessary to the functioning of a free society, and you can see people's eyes glaze over. People's eyes probably glazed over when Thomas Jefferson said it. We are terrible at this. So here are 3 things to consider if you think the reporters you read, listen to, or watch, or the ones you ignore, go to work in the morning intending to carry out some evil plan to poison the news. First, who goes to work every day to do their job badly or unethically or both on purpose? Pretty risky career strategy. Second, to believe all journalists are anything, you also have to believe that everybody who does what you do for a living thinks and acts exactly the same. Third, listen to what that wise old wise ass of the news business, David Brinkley, once said at the end of his Sunday morning show on ABC in the 1990s. He said that in 50-plus years in TV news, he'd received a lot of letters that began, "I disagree with you, and you're biased." But he said he'd never received even a single one that began, "I agree with you, and you're biased." As another famous reporter once observed, quoting Shakespeare,
Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Good night, and good luck.
Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Meet you back here on Monday. Now you know what we know. I'm Jeff Kaufman, High Definition News.